At exactly 3:10 a.m., a Ukrainian Bayar TB2 reconnaissance drone picked up a strange, deep origin signal far inside Russian-held territory. On its thermal display, two bright cores snapped into focus, a dual heat signature, crisp and unmistakable. The AI targeting suite didn't hesitate. It auto-flagged the contacts. Two Russian MI-8 AMT helicopters, each worth around $16 million, had just landed at an airbase on the Crimean peninsula. Down in the underground UAV operations room in Zaporizhia, conversation died away almost instantly. Crews stared at the screens. Everyone felt the same thing tightening in the air. Tension. One voice finally exhaled it out loud. One precise strike here wouldn't just destroy two helicopters. It could maim the entire local supply chain. Both MI-8s had just finished a nearly 2-hour flight, hauling more than 60 troops and their gear away from the front line. The moment they touched down, ground crews taxied them straight into the technical area for standard maintenance and refueling. On the ramp, the mood was casual, almost celebratory. Officers peeled off flight suits and gloves, laughed, poured vodka into plastic cups, and raised a quick toast to a perfect sortie. They had no idea that this routine flight was the breadcrumb Ukraine needed, the tiny trace that would give Kiev the exact coordinates of their hidden base. Like setting out a single sugar cube in the old ant game, Ukraine needed only one sweet lure to draw the ant home and then burn the nest. By 3:20 a.m., just minutes after the MI-8s rolled to a stop, the big screens at the Gore Command Center in Zaporizhia began flashing. Commercial infrared satellite feeds had caught a hot patch on the ramp where the helicopter engines were still glowing. The Bayar TB2 reconnaissance UAV loitering outside the corridor was immediately retasked. It dropped to about 1,650 feet, skimmed low over terrain, and slid into a blind sector that the Nebo and Podlet K-1 radars simply couldn't see. Its composite airframe made it look, on radar, like nothing more than a small bird. On Russian screens, it was almost a ghost. Electro-optical and infrared sensors locked onto the residual heat bleeding from the MI-8 engines. The live video streamed back to the UAV command post in Zaporizhia, and what it showed made everything crystal clear. This was no random parking strip. At least two MI-8s were staged for redeployment. Two B-12s sat ready for maritime reconnaissance. Behind them, a forest of Nebo antennas stood, capable of tracking low observable aircraft and hundreds of targets at once. Human intelligence had already warned that this base held hundreds of tons of fuel and ammunition in its hangars and storage yards, enough to keep continuous air operations going, keep pressure on Ukraine's defenses, and hold supply lines open. If this base went dark, the enemy wouldn't just lose some concrete and a few hangars, they'd lose a critical node. A strategic blind spot would open, early warning would be dulled, logistics lines would crack, air defenses would drop in effectiveness, and lanes would open for follow-on Ukrainian strikes. The Ghost Special Task Unit didn't waste the moment. They moved. Surveillance escalated into a 3-layered strike plan. A UAV formation that had been quietly deployed for almost 2 hours received new orders, change course, and push into the final corridor. At 3:25 a.m., that formation closed to within 25 miles of the target. At the front flew two UJ-22 airborne decoy UAVs. They held about 985 feet in altitude and cruised near 100 miles per hour. They carried no warheads. Their entire purpose was suicidal and simple: advertise themselves, emit strong signals, jam the 2.4 GHz and 5.8 GHz bands. With carbon fiber skins and oversized airframes, they didn't try to hide. They wanted to be seen. To enemy radar, they were supposed to look like the main threat, the first sacrificial targets. Exactly 656 feet behind them, three Liutan 196 attack UAVs slid quietly through the air as the real killers. They flew lower, around 490 feet, cruising between 112 and 124 miles per hour. Each drone carried a 165-pound shaped charge warhead. The trio held an arrow formation, tight and disciplined. They emitted no signals at all. Guidance ran entirely on an internal navigation suite, completely independent of GPS. Their objective: a military airbase in Crimea, its coordinates confirmed less than 5 minutes earlier. From the moment they launched, The formation transmitted no control traffic on open bands. Every movement followed the rehearsal script, down to the second. The bait was about to hit the tripwire. At 3:27 a.m., the two UJ-22 decoys crossed into the first air defense recognition zone. A Podlet K-1 station, more than 12.5 miles from the airfield, began to register strange mid-altitude contacts. Warning indicators lit up in the cabin. Radar operators cranked up scan frequency. The Nebo U radar switched to active mode. High-frequency cones swept out in widening arcs. The UJ-22 signatures sharpened on the screens. On the Podlet K-1 display, two unknown returns appeared over and over at 900 to 1,000 feet, about 11.5 miles from the airfield, closing fast. No valid response code. The first assessment from the alert station, loitering or reconnaissance kamikaze UAVs preparing to strike. The local air defense commander ordered Condition 1. Immediately, Nebo U turned hard, shifted to high-rate scanning. A Pantsir S-1 battery on the eastern perimeter of the airfield powered up. 257 E6 rounds roared skyward in a single salvo. 14 seconds later, two bright flashes split the sky. Fireballs blossomed. Wreckage rained down on open ground less than 1,650 feet from the airfield fence. Both neutralized. Clear, the duty officer in the command cabin reported. Air defenses scaled back to a temporary alert level. Podlet went back toward routine patrol cycles. Nebo U kept scanning, but relaxed its sweep rate on the southeast axis. No one realized the real operation had just started. At 3:30 minutes and 42 seconds past the hour, as Nebo U swung its beam northwest, the three LUT-196s slid deeper toward the base. The lead drone eased into a shallow 10-degree break off the original axis. The two wingmen stayed in formation and dropped below 330 feet, skimming the low tree line south of the base. All three slipped into the gap between radar sweeps just as the air defense units were recalibrating after the first volley. The route had been calculated down to the meter to pass through the intersecting nulls of two sweep arcs, a razor-thin window cut out of the fragmented side lobes, wide enough to enter, narrow enough to be gone before Russian radar could lock again. This was radar evasion as a craft. The same technique had already carried Ukrainian UAVs all the way to Moscow, Kazan, and even Astrakhan on the Caspian shore. While Pantsir crews were still rezeroing after blasting apart the decoys, the real dagger point had already pierced the outer defensive ring. Distance to the base dropped under 10 miles. At current speed, the formation would be over the target in under 5 minutes. From this moment on, every control input exploited radar beam rotation timing and the Pantsir S-1's reaction lag after engaging the first wave. 2 minutes later, the three UAVs crossed into the attack corridor together. Range confirmed. Liuchi units have entered the attack corridor. Lock heading Crimea base. MI-8 cluster, B-12S, Nebo U. The range coordinator confirmed. On the control screens, infrared imagery told the story in brutal clarity. Two MI-8s parked out on the west ramp, fully exposed. Two B-12S sitting at the edge of a hangar. The radar cluster uncovered and vulnerable. The airfield still hadn't understood the real danger. The threat was already at ankle height, hugging the ground and locking onto three lethal nodes. At 3:33 minutes and 45 seconds past the hour, Nebo U finally registered a faint echo at ultra-low altitude. A dim heat band crept onto the edge of the screen. Low-level contact accelerating, the sector coordinator warned. Alert level 2 was triggered too late. Inside the Ukrainian control center, engineers armed final dive mode. Automatic terminal dives locked onto pre-designated aim points. All three Leoti accelerated into their terminal run. Their closing speed climbed to between 145 and 155 miles per hour. Each airframe was about 5 feet long, with a 7-foot wingspan and a carbon composite structure to cut weight and radar cross-section. These UAVs were built for ambush strikes. One hit, and cascading destruction would do the rest. 30 seconds later, Lodi 1 began to climb, pulling up to 600 feet. Target, the MI-8 cluster on the west ramp, still sitting in the open. Lodi 2 broke off from the formation with a 15-degree bank to the left, locking onto the Nebo U antenna. Thermal imaging showed the 45-foot antenna array turning slowly. No intercept vector declared. LUT-3 held its course and fixed on the two B-12s parked side by side on the east ramp near maintenance and refueling trucks. Behind those nodes, an expeditionary fuel dump held over 1,100,000 pounds of aviation fuel, and ammunition caches had been spread out for dispersed operations. Countdown: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. The blast. The clock read 3:35 minutes and 23 seconds. Nebo 1 came in on a 26-degree angle and drove straight into the engine bay of the MI-8 AMT while the helicopter was under maintenance. The impact flashed white, then erupted into a fireball over 330 feet high, lighting the entire base in an instant. The shaped charge detonation, combined with the MI-8's own fuel, cooked the surrounding drums. Peak overpressure passed 50 pounds per square inch. The blast slammed into MI-8 No. 2, parked just 15 feet away. Both helicopters were torn apart, fuselages shredded, rotor blades hurled more than 230 feet, crashing onto the roof of a nearby hangar. A refueling truck was thrown aside. Fires jumped and spread violently. Just 0.8 seconds later, LUT-3 hit the right-hand B-12. The airframe of the B-12 ripped open. Debris punched through the auxiliary fuel bunker. The second B-12 went up in the chain explosion that followed. Flames ran from wing to fuselage and into the maintenance bay. At 3:35 minutes and 27 seconds a.m., LUT-2, with surgical precision, plowed directly into the main Nebo U antenna array. A dry, savage detonation tore the night apart. Russia's eye was gone. The radar collapsed into a blazing pile of twisted metal. The shockwave rolled out across more than 12.5 miles. Locals later said they thought it was an earthquake. Windows in warehouses up to 1,970 feet away shattered. The ramp turned into a torch. The covert airbase had become an inferno. Commercial infrared satellites registered a thermal bloom over 1,320 feet wide at the Crimea command site. At 3:36 a.m., Russia's UHF network transmitted its last message: base under attack, radar damaged, aircraft damaged, requesting immediate assistance, then radio silence. In under 7 minutes, the strategic airbase in Crimea had lost all defensive and air control capability and was burning out. From the main radar to the MI-8 cluster, the entire west ramp was consumed. Fires climbed into the sky. Black smoke streamed for hundreds of meters. Blast pressure hammered warehouses nearly 1,970 feet away. Within 2 minutes of impact, at least 7 secondary detonations went off, burning fuel, spreading pool fires, serial detonations in the B-12 munitions bunkers, a backup command vehicle destroyed by blast overpressure. By 4:15 a.m., commercial IR satellites had logged a high-intensity hotspot over West Crimea, with a radiant area greater than 350 meters. Telegram clips from Jangoy residents surfaced, showing massive night fires, hot shrapnel raining onto roofs, and military police sealing off the area. Maxar imagery on the morning of the 21st of September showed the damage without ambiguity. 3 MI-8s reduced to charred frames. 1 B-12 twisted beyond recognition. Nebo radar collapsed, its antenna broken and dead. The ramp blackened across more than 984 feet, with debris, burn marks, and smoke stains visible even from orbit. Estimated damage blew past $180 million. The base lost 100% of its helicopter lift, its primary early warning radar, expeditionary fuel stocks, and ammunition stores. Logistics operations froze. For Ukraine, the strategic effect was decisive. This wasn't some generic staging strip. It was one of the few remaining expeditionary airfields in central Crimea. Russia had been using it to redeploy attack helicopters, fly B-12 maritime patrol missions, and run resupply flights to forward hubs in Kherson and Jankoy, critical links in the operational logistics chain. With the base neutralized, Moscow now had to re-engineer its southern logistics. Cargo flights would have to route farther out, transit times would grow, detection risk would rise. Jankoy's air defense radar no longer had compensating coverage, leaving a 90-kilometer blind sector to the west, an opening Ukraine could exploit in future operations. Ukraine had forced Russian defenses to shuffle, disperse, and expose their gaps. Every reaction created new targets for GER and Ukraine's UAV forces. Moscow's Ministry of Defense stayed silent for hours. Officially, nothing had happened. Only later did Telegram channels post a vague line: a technical fire had occurred in Crimea, cause under investigation. OSINT analysts didn't need the statement. They matched coordinates with thermal imagery. The struck area lined up perfectly in before and after satellite mosaics. The once hidden base now had its coordinates laid bare to the world. Operation Ghost was far more than a UAV raid. It was a preemptive punitive strike that shattered a key defensive node in Crimea. With the Nebo radar gone, early warning on the northwest axis of the peninsula vanished. The MI-8 lift cluster for troop movements and fast assault was destroyed. B-12 maritime reconnaissance capability was heavily degraded. Fuel and ammunition caches were wiped out, grounding Jangoy air activity for 48 hours. In the aftermath, Russia was forced to lock down the base perimeter, deploy additional Padlet K-1 air defense systems, and suspend all low-level flight operations in the area. With just 3 low-flying UAVs, Ukraine had turned what once seemed an invulnerable base into a field of wreckage. The message was simple and brutal. In modern war, timing and tactics can outweigh the most expensive hardware.